Well, welcome to Freedom. If you're at our Ackworth location, Kennesaw, watching online, wherever it is that you are at, we're excited to be able to have you. We're on the second week of this series that we've been doing called Summer Mixtape. And some of y'all don't even know what a mixtape is. You don't even have a frame of reference for no mixtape. Y'all have it easy now. You got Spotify and everything else. We had to put stuff on tapes, and sometimes they would get messed up, and you had to put your finger in this little hole and twist it in order to make everything work. And so, nonetheless, y'all don't even know. Your biggest problem is if you're willing to pay the $10 a month or not for Spotify. We were trying to fix them daggum tapes. Good Lord Jesus, help us. But anyway, it's good to see you. I was just reminiscing about that. I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, I bet people in this room, half of them don't even know what a mixtape is. But nonetheless, we're glad that you're here. We're going to have a good time today. And that song that they just sang, and it was awesome, by the way. But that song that they just did is so true. One of the worst things for me, and I bet you feel the same way. One of the worst things ever is when you feel like you've let somebody down. I hate it. Don't you hate the feeling? Y'all looked at me like, oh, I don't care if I let anybody down. Or I've never let anybody down before. Maybe that's you. But when I feel like I've let somebody down, it drives me nuts. And sometimes it's not somebody else that I let down. Sometimes I get annoyed at myself because I feel like I'm letting my own self down. You ever felt this way before? This means, yes, I haven't been here for a couple of weeks, so I might have to recondition you how to talk back the way that I need you to. But sometimes we get in this rhythm and this cycle where we let people down, we let ourselves down. If you're a parent, you know exactly what it is I'm talking about, especially if you got multiple kids. I got 3 kids, so therefore I'm letting at least one of them down every single day. I'm doing something they wish I didn't do. I'm saying something they wish I didn't say. I'm telling them no to something they wish I would have said yes to, whatever the case may be. If you're a parent, you know what it means to let people down. If you are in a relationship or if you're married, if you are married, you have definitely let somebody down before, right? Some of you, you've been praying for a husband. Lord, give me a husband. I pray that you would give me a husband in Jesus' name. And then all of a sudden you get a husband and you're like, Lord, I need you to be with my husband, because if you're not with the husband, I'm going to murder somebody today. Maybe maybe for you it's not that. Maybe for you, or it's a combination of all this. Sometimes for me it's a habit that I have, and I'm trying to break some habits, or sometimes I'm trying to add a habit to my life. Have you ever tried to break a habit and you tell yourself you are going to break a habit, and then you do break a habit, but then the next day you pick up the habit again? Like, you drop the habit, and then 2 hours later you pick it right back up. Have you ever done this? Say amen. It happens. It happens. Sometimes it's trying to remove something from your life. Sometimes you're trying to add something from your life. And if it doesn't work, if you get stuck in this crazy cycle, what'll end up happening is you'll start giving yourself excuses, and you'll say, well, I'm never going to defeat this because I don't know what it is for you. Maybe it just runs in my family, right? It just runs in my family. My dad did it. My grandpa did it. My great grandpa did it. Now here I am. I'm going to do it. I don't even got no choice. I mean, it's like a gene that's just been passed down from generation to generation. I don't even need to try to break this thing because it is a generational curse, and now it has captured me. Or maybe you think, well, I've tried to change, but nothing is working, because that's just the way that I am. You ever said that before? I can't fix it, because that's just the way that I am. I am just that way. I'm never going to be able to stop gossiping, because that's just the way that I am. If that's just the way that you are, you need to fix how you are. That's why you don't got that many friends, because you gotta figure out how to get past where it is that you currently are. And sometimes, even though you know that to be true, it's still difficult, and you get discouraged because you start thinking in your mind. You might even say it out loud, or you just think it in your mind. This is how I've always been, so this is how I'll always be. This is how I've always been. This is how I'll always be. And the reason you start feeling that way is because you try to make something happen. You try to move in the right direction. You try to not let people down. You try not to let yourself down. You try to break the addiction. You try to eliminate the bad habit or pick up the new one. You tried everything you can. You try not to lose your temper. You tell yourself you're not going to lose your mind whenever you are on the road in traffic. You tell yourself you're not going to do it. You tell yourself you're not going to lose your patience with your kids. You tell yourself you're not going to yell at the umpire or the referee or both at the exact same time. You tell yourself you're not going to do it, and then you do it. And you feel like you get stuck in this cycle and you can't make progress and you can't figure out where it is that you're going because you have always been the way that you are. Therefore, it feels like this is the way that you will always be. And what I want to do today, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do my best to shine the light on some things. But one of the things I want to show you today is that who you are and who you were does not necessarily dictate who you can be and who God can enable you to be. In other words, God has more for every single person that's here. Look to somebody next to you and just say, God has more for you. Say, God has more for you. Every person in here, that's true. God has more for you. Now, I'm going to show you this in the Bible. There's a story, those of you that have a Bible with pages, 1 Samuel chapter 22. If you have it on your phone or on some other device, you can start getting ready to go there. In 1 Samuel 22, there's a story about a guy by the name of David. David had been anointed as the king. Now, he wasn't appointed as the king yet. He was anointed as the king when he was 13 years old. Now, that's a lot of pressure when you're 13 years old to be anointed as the king. It's pretty awesome. But there was another king who was currently the king, and he was going to have to wait for this king to no longer be in power for this little kid, 13-year-old David, to be able to take over. There's a lot of stuff that happens. I don't have time to go into all of it, but David ends up being in the palace. He would play musical instruments for the king whenever he would be struggling with depression and anxiety, which he struggled with, real deal, clinical, constantly. And so the king would be in a good mood, then he'd be in a bad mood. And when he'd be in a bad mood, he started getting jealous of David. David would be in there playing his harp to try to cheer him up. And all of a sudden, the king would pick up a spear and throw it at David's face, and David would have to duck and run out of the room. And then the crazy part is the next day, he'd have to go in there and do it all over again. I mean, this was a crazy cycle. Over time, the king increasingly grew even more jealous of David, and David was consistently having to be on the run because he had a paranoid king who was consistently trying to kill him. And so that's where we'll pick up. 1 Samuel chapter 22, David's on the run again. It says this, it says, David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. So his boys come down to be with them in the midst of his anguish. And it says, all those who were in distress. Now, these are the people that went down there to hang out with David. You might find this funny. I find it hilarious. It says, all those who were in distress or in debt or discontented gathered around him, and he became their commander. About 400 men were with him. So the people that came out there to hang out with David were the people that were in distress, the people who were in debt, the people who were disillusioned, the people who were mad at life and running from life and everything else. David looks around and he's like, this is who you sent me. He looks around at all his friends, and his friends were, they all needed more help than he did. And so he's like, all right, man, this is interesting. At least I got some people with me. That's good. 400 people show up. But again, it's the people in distress, the people in debt, and the people who were discontented. They were all running. They weren't running for their life. They were running from their life. Have you ever either physically ran from your life or you wanted to run and wished you could run from your life? Say yes. I bet you have. I mean, I know what it's like to run from the things that you know you need to do. Maybe you're running from a relationship that needs to be reconciled. Maybe you're running from some of your responsibilities. Sometimes we do run from the predicaments that we find ourselves in. That's the exact scenario that David and these 400 men were in. And when they ran to a cave. Now, I bet most of you have never ran to a physical cave, but everybody here has caves that you run to. Everybody in this room, everybody watching online, Every single person, you have caves that you run to. We all do. I have caves that I run to. You have caves that you run to. And the reality is that the cave can be anything. I mean, the cave can look like anything. The cave can be any size. The cave can be anywhere. But we all know what it's like to run to the cave. The cave is the place you run when you need to escape. You ever just needed to escape for a minute? And sometimes you can just put on your headphones and drown out the world, turn the music up high, and you get like a 3.5-minute escape. But sometimes you don't necessarily pick the healthiest escape options. And sometimes the very thing that you're running to in order to escape is the thing that is causing you to be held captive. Because some of us, when we run to escape, we run to a bottle. Some of us, maybe your bottle doesn't have liquid in it. Maybe your bottle has some pills. And you run to that bottle. That is your cave. And you told yourself you ain't running to that cave anymore. And you've done everything you know to do, but you keep running back. That's your cave. It's the place where you run when you need to escape. The cave it's a pretty interesting place because it's a place of silence. It's not a lot happening in the cave. That's the reason that you run there. You run there because you're sick of all the voices at times. You're sick of everything that's going on around you, and you just need to figure out a way to get some silence, or at least that's how you feel and what it is that you think you need. You need silence. The cave is a place of darkness. It's a place of difficulty. It's a place where you experience distance. See, when I run to a cave, did you know sometimes I run to the cave whenever there's an obstacle that I want to overcome, but I don't feel like I got the energy in order to do it? You ever done that before? There's times where you wonder whether or not people have your back, and if you're afraid that they don't, sometimes you will distance yourself from those people, not even because of anything that they did, but because of some stuff that's going on in your mind that's causing you to think that you need to go the other direction. There are times where I say, at Freedom Church, we always say we have each other's back, this, that, and the other. And I'm going to tell you how Satan lies to me. He says to me, yeah, but if that microphone ever came out of your hands, how many of those people would still be with you? And you know what I'll say to myself? I'll say, all right, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to hold everybody at a distance. I'm going to make sure that nobody gets close enough to me in order to hurt me, so that if they walk, it don't even matter. That's my cave. And don't look at me and judge me, because you got caves too. Everybody here, you got caves that you run into. You got things that you're trying to hide from. You got some stuff that you know you need to deal with, but you have refused up until this point to try to deal with it, or you've tried to deal with it and you're so sick and tired of failing that you keep running to the cave anyway. Now, what I want to do today is I want to show you, because if we're all going to run to the cave at times, I want to do everything I know how to do to make sure that when I come running out of the cave, that I run out of that cave differently than the way that I ran into it. Because if I don't come out of the cave different, then I'm going to come out of the cave and think I'm in the clear. And then I'm going back in. And you know what I don't like? I don't like running. Right? I don't like running. I don't like it. I think running is not awesome. It is not wonderful. I like the working out stuff most of the time. I like weights most of the time. I like all that. I don't like running. I especially don't like running on treadmills, because you ain't going nowhere. And I got this elliptical machine in my house, and I'll get on it, and it's got all these things that you look at, and it's pretty, and it makes you think you're running through the mountains. You ain't running through no mountains. You're still in the same room. You ain't even doing nothing. You're just running. But the thing is, on the treadmill, you're exerting the same energy. You're still getting tired, and then you get off, and you're like, I ain't going nowhere. That's what happens when you keep running back into the cave, but you don't deal with whatever it is that's causing you to run there. So what I want to do is I want to run out of the cave differently than the way that I ran into the cave, so that I don't have to repeat the cycle every day of my life. And if you want something different, you got to do something different. That's the definition of insanity, is to do the same things over and over and expect different results. So I want to show you, and I want to show myself what it is that we got to do to make sure that we walk out of the cave differently than the way that we walked in. How many of you have been watching, at least at some level, the last couple of weeks, that whole scenario with that little soccer team from Thailand that's been stuck in that cave? Raise your hand. That's the craziest thing you ever see. Those of you that haven't kept up with it, these kids, most of them were 13 and 14. There was one that turned 17 in the cave and one that's 11, and then they got a 25-year-old coach. They went in after soccer practice to this cave that they've been in a million times, and they go deeper and deeper into the cave as they had done a million times. But this time something happened on the outside that they were unaware of, and it started to rain. And when it started to rain, the water started to fill, and because of that, when they turned around to make their way out of the cave, the passageway that they had used, their only option, was so filled with water that now they're stuck. So the water continued to rise, and they had to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into the cave in order to be able to find high enough ground so that they could remain safe. This lasted for 10 days. For 10 days, they had no food. For 10 days, they had no light. For 10 days, the only water they had was the water that was dripping off the rocks at the top of the cave, but they could barely see. In order to get it, they had to feel it and just look up and open their mouth. 10 days. The parents didn't know where they were. Nobody knew where they were. And they're just kind of hanging out in there, and the news coverage was crazy. Once they figured out they were in the cave somewhere. Somewhere in that cave, there was a bunch of kids and their soccer coach, and then the world was captivated trying to figure out if these kids were going to survive. And I remember I was watching the news, and they were asking this reporter who was down on the ground, and they said to him, do you think that they are going to be able to make it? And he said something that was great. He said, it all depends on what happens in the cave. He said, it all depends whether they're going to survive this thing or not. It all depends on what happens in the cave. Because they're going to be afraid. But if their fear turns to panic, they'll die. But if their fear is overcome and it turns to courage, there's a possibility that they will survive. And I would go so far as to say to you that what happens to you, whether or not you have a breakthrough or you remain stuck, it all depends what happens in the cave. David and his men, they were in a cave. They had run from their life. And when they do, watch this. The very next book of the Bible, they've been doing their thing. They're hanging out in the cave. But something happened in the cave that changed everything about those 401 men. Watch this. Watch what it says about them in 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 8. This is the same group of people. It says, these are the names of David's mighty warriors. I don't have time to read out 400 of them, so I'll just pick a couple. Josheb-Basshebeth. That's the name right there. Look at little Josheb-Basshebeth. He's such a wonderful little boy. He raised his spear against 800 men whom he killed in one encounter for making fun of his name. I added that last part. Next to him was Eleazar, who stood his ground, this is crazy, and struck down the Philistines till his hand grew tired and froze to the sword. That's crazy. You imagine, don't really imagine it because you might be a psychopath, but if you had a machete and you were chopping people up, and you were chopping so many people up, your arm is so tired it can't even pull the machete up anymore, and then all of a sudden you go to release your fingers, and when you do, they're stuck to the sword because they are frozen with the blood of the enemy freezing your hand. That is crazy. You are quite a man. I was going to say something else. You are quite a man. If that's the way that goes down, that is intense. And then there's another guy next to him was old Shammah. Y'all remember old Shammah? He's a good dude. He defended it. What's it? A field of beans. That's funny. I have never defended a field of beans. Now, a field of cupcakes, let's go. It says, next, I'm not allowed to have cupcakes though, so it's all good. No worries, Eddie. Next to him was Shammah. He defended the field of beans and struck the Philistines down, and the Lord brought about a great victory. Those were the same men. The very same people who went into the cave just a little while ago. And it says those that went into the cave, they were in distress, they were in debt, and they were discontented. disillusioned. They went in wounded, and they came out warriors. How? It all depends on what happens in the cave. You say, what do you mean? It all depends on what happens in the cave. The cave is a place, we said this already, the cave is a place of silence. But did you know that in the places of silence in your life is usually when God speaks the loudest? It's when everything gets quiet where you get to actually hear the voice of God. It's when all the other voices have been drowned out. And the only person that can help you in your situation is God. That's when you truly begin to hear his words being spoken into your life. And what David did, he goes into the cave and he starts praying. And I love the way David prayed. He seemed a little bit schizophrenic, but I love the example that he provides. Because sometimes when he was praying, he would say, "Oh, Lord, you are good and you are great and you are the Most High." And that's awesome, if that's how you're feeling. But then the very next verse, he would be like, "I feel like you've neglected me. I feel like you forgot me. And I got this guy that's driving me crazy, and I hope he dies." That's for real. He legitimately prayed for people that were coming after him. He said, "Lord, I pray that you would kill them." They're called the imprecatory Psalms. I learned about them when I was in school. And as a result, you can pray for people to die. That's crazy. That's a Bible prayer, is when you pray for people to die. I don't suggest it. I've only done it twice in my whole life. And that's a true story. I actually did do it 2 different times. And I do not apologize for that because David did it. And it says David was a man after God's own heart. Praise the Lord. Now, so David starts trying to hear from God. People say, you can't talk to God and tell him how you feel. Can I tell you something? God already knows how you feel. You might as well approach him from the place where you really are. He knows what you're thinking anyway. You can't have a relationship with somebody you got to pretend around. So if you're going to have a real deal relationship with God, if you're upset, tell him. He's big enough to handle you. It's not like he's going to be like, "Oh no, what do I do? Little Tina's upset." He can handle you. He can do what he needs to do. He wants you to be real. So David is. And when David does, when he hears from God, he hears the right voice. And when you hear the right voice, you're more likely to make the right choice. You surround yourself in the silence. Here's the thing. Remember, it all depends on what happens in the cave. In the cave, we hear the voices. You got to choose which voices you're going to listen to. If you listen to the right voices, you'll make the right choices. But if you listen to the wrong voices, you'll make the wrong choices. There are friends that are in your life that you have no business taking their advice. Because it's like having a financial advisor that's broke. Or having a trainer that's fat. If you have some of you got a trainer and your trainer's 572 pounds and you're wondering why his plan don't work. I know why his plan don't work. If I go to a financial advisor, I don't want my financial advisor to be broke. You understand? Somebody like, "That's mean." No, it's not mean. That's smart. So he was listening to the right voice and he made the right choice. How do we hear the right voices? Every time you dive into God's word, it doesn't have to be a lot, it can be a little. You read a verse or two and you feel like God is actually speaking into your situation. Those are the right voices. And when you hear the right voices every day, you're more likely to make the right choices every day. It will enable you to get off the treadmill of life. And you can actually move forward instead of being stuck. I told our students at Wave Week, which was phenomenal, by the way. It was amazing. I told them, I think it was the second night, I pulled out my phone and I said, when you get back, I want you to download the YouVersion Bible app on your phone. And the reason I want you to do it, because you can find a Bible plan and you can read something for 5 minutes every single day and you listen to the right voices, you'll make the right choices. It really is as simple as that. That's what happens in the cave if you're wise. It all depends on what happens in the cave. You got to listen to the right voice, but you also got to listen to the right people. You got to listen to the right people. You got to listen to the right people. Not just the people that will tell you anything you want to hear. I've been guilty of this. You ever needed an opinion and you go to like the first three people and they give you good advice, but it's not the advice you want. So you keep going to another person and it doesn't tell you what you want to hear. Oh, yeah. You deserve it. Your wife, she's crazy. It's fine. It's just one night. It's just a one-night stand. It'll help your marriage. It'll be great. There are people out there that will tell you that. That's the wrong people. But you listen to the wrong people, you're going to stay on a treadmill. Matter of fact, the thing you're trying to escape from is going to leave you even more captive. It's crazy how this thing works. And what I want to do today, I want to show you, if you'll listen to the right voices and the right people, it'll help you to be able to make the right choices. Your faith is personal. People say it all the time. They're like, my faith is personal. It is personal, but it's not private. Your faith isn't private. The reason a lot of people stay stuck is because they think their faith is private, and because they think it's private, they don't have anybody around them that can help them. And if you ain't got nobody around you that can help you, when you're down, everybody else is down. And if everybody that is around you is down, and or you don't have anybody else that is around you, you don't have anybody to help pick you up. Do you understand what I'm saying? You can't do this life alone. I can't do this life alone. That's why I got to surround myself with people. That's why we do stuff like Wave Week, and why we do all these other things is to help surround people with people who can help them when they're down. My friends, chances are, whenever I'm down, one of them at least is going to be up. And chances are, when they're down, one of us is going to be up. And so what we can do is we can talk each other off the cliff. You ever needed somebody to talk you off the cliff before? That can't happen if you ain't got nobody to talk. You cannot do life alone. That's why the place of silence is where God speaks the loudest, but you just got to make sure you're listening to the right voices. The cave is also the place of darkness, but it's the place where you can experience the light. You know when the light is the brightest is when you've been somewhere that was dark. Did you see when those kids, they were in that cave for 10 days, and all of us, imagine how scary it must have been for them. They're in there for 10 days. They can't even see the hand in front of their face, and up from the water comes two British guys with a flashlight. That's hilarious to me. They shine that flashlight at those kids. There's video of it, and they're like, I mean, they didn't know if it was the Loch Ness Monster. They didn't know what it was coming out of the water. And all of a sudden, once it is that they saw the light, to them, that was the brightest light they had seen, maybe ever, because of how dark that it had been. Some of you are in a dark place. Some of you are in a mess. But those of you that are in a mess, when you begin to realize how good God is, you know that God can turn your mess into a message. That's what his specialty is. He is good at turning messes into messages. He can radically change your life, even in the darkest moment of your life. That's what God can do. That's why it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. In other words, at times, the more cracked your jar is, because let me just be honest with you, everybody here has a cracked jar. You are not perfect. There have been mistakes in your life. There have been messes. There have been misses. There have been mishaps. Your jar is cracked. But when your jar is cracked, it enables the light that God has to be able to shine through. When that begins to happen, when you allow your mess to be a message, God will use what you thought was your darkest time to be the thing that shines the light into the most people. It's amazing how God can take the worst moment of your life and transform it so that that mess can become a message, so that that can become something that speaks into the life of somebody else so they don't have to go through what you went through. Or if they're already going through what you went through, they know that there's a way out on the back end if they will just stay faithful in the middle of the process. That's what happens when you allow the mess to turn into a message. God can do unbelievable things. But not only was it a place of silence and darkness, but it's a place of distance. They went off into the cave. David and the 400 men, they went off in the cave to hide, to get away from their problems, to get away from their pain, to get away from their financial scenario and their financial situation, to get away from some of their relationships, whatever it is that they were running from. They were trying to separate themselves. They needed distance in the moment. A lot of times, when I should be running to God, I choose to run away from God. You ever notice that in the darkest times of your life, when it should drive you to your knees in prayer, sometimes you feel ashamed, and so you kind of feel like you need to get a few good days under your belt before you come back and talk to God? You're trying to create distance. But what's amazing about this scenario is that when they were running from their situation in order to create distance, is exactly the place where God came close. God met them right there in the cave. God met them in the place of hiding. God met them at the point of their pain. And I'm here to let you know today that that's exactly what God does for you. I know some of you have been running from God, and you feel as if you're far from Him. But I believe that when you feel the furthest is when God is actually the closest, because He's been pursuing you the entire time. Matter of fact, He's so close to you right now, He enabled you to be here today. He enabled you to be watching this message online. He is saying to you, I've been pursuing you, and even though you've been running the other direction, even though you've been on a treadmill and you've been running in circles, even though it feels like you are stuck, I am near. I'm close. I'm never going to leave you. I'm never going to forsake you. I'm never going to turn my back on you. I have got you. These kids that were there in that cave, for 10 days, it was 10 days till they found them. And then after they found them, they had to stay for more because they couldn't figure out how to get them out. They had to get these kids through water, through tight caverns. And you know what was crazy? The kids most of them didn't even know how to swim. So they were sending in the Navy SEALs from Thailand, the Thai Navy SEALs, and they were coming in having to figure out a way to try to get these jokers out. Because these kids were completely reliant on somebody else if they were going to be saved. Could you imagine how dumb they would have been if they would have been like the little 11-year-old? If they'd have been like, I don't need no Navy SEAL. I'm going to do this by myself. I got myself into this mess. I'm going to get myself out. I walked into this cave by myself. I'm walking out by myself. Wouldn't that have been dumb? But isn't that what we try to do every single day of our life? I don't need you, God. I got myself into this mess. I'll get myself out of the mess. I got myself into this situation. I'll get myself out of the situation. The reason we do it is because that's what religion tells us to do. But God says, forget religion. I need you to know that you can't clean up the mess that you made, but I know a person named Jesus, my one and only Son, who will come to this earth and who will clean up the mess that you made. That's why He lived on this earth for 33 years. That's why He was crucified on a cross so that you and I could be forgiven. That's why He was buried. When you think about Jesus being buried, because of the way we bury, we always think of Jesus being buried down in the ground. It was a hole cut out of a rock. Jesus was put in a cave. Jesus went into the cave alive. He went into that cave dead, and He came out of that cave alive. The reason you and I are here is because of something that happened in a cave. And I'm telling you right now, because of what Jesus did in a cave, and because of what can happen in your life in a cave, it's possible that you walked into this room one way and you're about to walk out a totally different way. It's possible you walked in wounded and you're going to walk out a warrior. All because of something that happened in a cave. That's what Jesus can do for every single one of us that's in this room. Matter of fact, that's what Jesus did do for every single person that's in this room. When we couldn't get to God, God came to us. It's exactly what happened to those Thai kids when they couldn't get out of the cave. God sent somebody in to get them. And for you and I in this room, whether we've been followers of Jesus for years or we're still on the front end of a relationship with God, because of what happened in a cave, Jesus can change your life from the inside out.